Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hello. My name is Alivia Brown and I am currently a fourth year undergraduate student at UCLA studying anthropology. And today we are finally talking about probably one of my most requested videos, and that is all about anthropology research methods. Now, anthropology research methods, I found very quickly, is not a topic that's very centralized anywhere online. Like, I could not find a single article that was like, all right, these are the main 5 or 4, however many, research methods of anthropology. And so I was like, no wonder everybody's asking me to talk about this. So today we're going to be focusing on the qualitative ethnographic sides of anthropology and anthropology research. If you don't know what an ethnography is, that's not a problem at all. I recommend checking out this video if you want. If not, you'll be fine with context clues. So let's just get into it. Now, throughout my time researching for this video, I kind of came to this conclusion that there's 4 main research methods that come up again and again in anthropology. Now, the first one is a semi-structured interview. And semi-structured interviews are really awesome because as the researcher or the anthropologist, you go into this interview with a list of a few questions. There's something that you're curious about, there's something that you want to know about, and you have these questions ready to go for when you interview your participants. Now, the fun part is you have these questions and then you kind of just let it go from there. You have this conversation with however many people you decide to interview, and each interview is kind of going to go a little bit of a different direction because even though you have a set of questions that are like your starting point, you get to focus a lot on each individual person that you end up interviewing. Now, semi-structured interviews are also really great because they kind of occupy this middle ground between structured interviews and non-structured interviews. I don't know if that's the technical term, but you get the perks of both, right? You have some sort of control that you get from a structured interview because you do go in with a few questions that are the same for every single interview. But then you also gain like this flexibility from these non-structured interviews where you get to learn a lot about each of the participants. Now, the next anthropology research method that I'm going to be talking about is participant observation. And well, I would argue that semi-structured interviews are probably the most widely used in the social sciences. I would say that participant observation is probably the most well known when it comes to anthropology more specifically. And participant observation really goes back to this traditional idea of anthropologists where you have an anthropologist going into some part of the world or new culture, new community, and observing exactly what's happening there. It's a very traditional and a very stereotypical almost way of understanding anthropology. But now this idea of participant observation can happen in many different ways. It can be what I just said, where the researcher goes and observes a particular community for several months or several years and comes to this conclusion. But it can also happen in like the corporate space or the digital space or on a college campus, where maybe you as the researcher go into the Google workspace, I don't know, and you kind of observe behind the scenes like what it's like, how the employees interact with each other, how you interact with your bosses, and you can actually get hired to then tell like the top dog of that company what could be fixed based on your observations and spending time in this space. Now, one thing that I really do want to mention about participant observation is this can be done both passively and actively. And the main difference there is whether or not you are becoming a part of this community. So in the corporate space, if you're observing some business structure, I'm not really sure. The passive way to do this would just be kind of you like walking around with your clipboard behind the scenes, just like taking some notes, right? But the active way to do this would actually be talking to employees, really learning more about the company, maybe trying to participate in some of the things that you could participate in. And there's definitely pros and cons to the active and passive forms of participant observation, but I did want to mention that like that research method kind of has 2 like sub methods. So yes, on to the next. Now, this research method might be my favorite. I just think it offers so much, and that is focus groups. Now, in a focus group, rather than interviewing one person like we talked about in the semi-structured interview, you are interviewing a group of people. and you're focusing on a certain set of questions or a certain idea, hence the term or the name focus group. Now, this is really great because right in front of you as the researcher, you have a ton of different perspectives, right? Like if you have one question, is a hot dog or a hamburger better, right? Some of these people are gonna think the hot dog is better, and some of these people are gonna think the hamburger is better, and they're going to be having this conversation, and you get to see a lot. When people have different opinions and how people acknowledge each other's differing opinions, I think brings a lot to the surface, and you get a lot out of that as the researcher. Now, often what tends to happen in these focus groups too is you are targeting a group of people, like the people in your focus group can have a similar background. So maybe you have a bunch of single mothers in there, or maybe you are interviewing an immigrant community or something else to create this kind of control. And also usually you want like the people that you're interviewing to have some similarity because that's what your research is about. But ultimately here you just get a lot of different perspectives, and generally too the researcher will tend to do like many focus groups. Like there's not just one group and then you write your research paper. You'll have these questions and talk to different groups of people many different times before you come to a certain conclusion. Now, this last research method I've probably honestly interacted with the least as a college student, and that is textual analysis. Now, it's probably a little bit surprising because I feel like it's the thing that you actually would expect college students to be doing, but textual analysis in anthropology research is exactly what it sounds like, and you are analyzing a certain set of texts based on a certain idea or a certain framework. So maybe you have a group of documents and you are looking at these documents and you're trying to understand reflexivity. I'm making this up as I go. It almost gives you like a starting point of investigation, if that makes sense. Like you are starting with this idea of reflexivity and seeing how it plays into these different texts, and then of course comparing and contrasting each of these texts. So those are actually all 4 of the main anthropology research methods that I was able to compile for this week's video. I do want to mention really quickly, there are more types of anthropology research. This was very connected and focused on qualitative research methods. And of course that each of these research methods bring their own pros and cons to the table. For some research projects and research questions, one of these methods will be better than another, and you can't have one that's the best. My question for you guys now is, would you guys like either a part 2 to this video, or maybe a video series where I take a deep dive into each of these methods more specifically? So a whole video maybe devoted to participant observation and then semi-structured interviewing and focus groups. I don't really know exactly what that would look like, but I wanted to just throw it out there and would love to hear your guys' opinions. Now, as always, my sources will be linked down below. Any other important information will be linked down below, and I will see everybody in next week's video. So I hope you're having a fantastic week, a fantastic Sunday, and yes, I will see you all then. Bye.